Thank you so much for joining Nir. So, for those of you who don't know Nir, let me introduce you real quick. Nir has lectured at Stanford and both business school and design school. And his first book, Hooked, which is one of my favorite, How to Build Habit Forming Products, is an international bestseller and taught at Silicon Valley. His second book, Indistractable, which we're gonna deep dive into today, is also is how to control your attention and choose your life. Reveals about Achilles' heel of distraction and provides a guidebook for getting the best of technology without letting it get the best of us. Nir also writes and consults and teaches about intersection of psychology, technology, business, all of that at nirandfar.com. So you can find him at nirandfar.com or social media at nireyal.com. All right, so let's dive into your first book. Let's start with Hooked because I want to split this session into both Hooked and I want to talk about Indistractable too. So let's start us. I want to start us off with your first book, Hooked, and what is this hook model for our listeners here, and this hook model that has taken the consumer industry by storm? Can you give us insight into this hook model? What is it?
Sure. So the hook model is an experience designed to connect the user's problem to your product with enough frequency to form a habit. And it's through successive cycles through these hooks that product preferences are formed, that our tastes are shaped, and that our habits take hold. There are four parts to the hook model: the trigger, the action, the reward, and the investment. And we see this pattern repeated in all sorts of products and services, from social networks like Facebook to health apps, thought, even the Bible app, which has hundreds of millions of users, also uses the hook model. We see it in education companies like Kahoot, which I was thankful enough to invest in. All kinds of products can use the hook model for good.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So since we have a community of a lot of product managers, UX designers here, how can product teams figure out the right triggers to use for the product? We see technology products, we use technology, we live technology in technology world, but how can product teams dive into and start to think about those triggers?
Right, so there are two types of triggers. We have what we call external triggers and internal triggers. External triggers you're probably very familiar with, right? Every product designer knows about external triggers. It's the pings, the dings, the rings, the notifications, all the things in our outside environment that tell us what to do with some piece of information. Turns out that's only about 10% of the time that we act, specifically when it comes to doing things on our phone. Only 10% of the time do we check our phones because of some kind of external trigger. So what's the other 90%? The other 90% of the time, it's because of what we call an internal trigger. An internal trigger is some kind of uncomfortable emotional state that we seek to escape from. Boredom, loneliness, fatigue, uncertainty, stress, anxiety, these uncomfortable emotions are 90% of the reason why you check your phone, or sorry, 90% of the time you check your phone. It's because of the desire to escape that kind of discomfort. So when we're feeling lonely, check Facebook. When you're uncertain, Google. When you're bored, oh my gosh, lots of solutions for boredom, right? Check Pinterest or the news or stock prices, sports scores, lots of things to do to alleviate ourselves of these uncomfortable internal triggers. So what your product needs to do, if you are building a customer habit, it has to attach itself to these uncomfortable emotional states. If you cannot identify what is that uncomfortable emotional state and does it occur with sufficient frequency, you're just hoping to get lucky. How to build a product that gets people hooked without understanding and being able to articulate throughout your entire team, everybody working on the product, everybody touching the product experience needs to be able to rattle off all four steps of the hook: trigger, action, reward, investment. But the most important step is that first phase of what is the internal trigger. And so you have to be able to identify it. One of the best places to look for those internal triggers is to understand how people are currently solving this problem. So, many times I'll meet with entrepreneurs and I'll ask them, hey, how do people currently solve this problem? And they'll tell me, no, you don't understand, Nir. Nobody has ever solved this problem before. This is, this is brand new, blue ocean, white space. There's nothing in the market for this type of problem. And they typically think that's a good thing. And I'm usually pretty skeptical. Why? Because if you can't tell me what the existing habit is, if you can't tell me the customer problem and where they go to fix that problem right now, most likely that means it's not really a problem. So the way we look for these internal triggers is we look for nascent behaviors. We look for offline behaviors that have crappy solutions. That's okay. It's all right if the customer is stitching together their own solutions with scotch tape and bubble gum. That's okay. That's fine. But I want to always see where is the existing solution to this problem and why does it need a new solution?
Totally, totally love it. I'm now starting to think about, like offline too. People do lots of things in, to have homemade solution to things. The way I'm connecting this a problem and connecting it with a solution is not just those two, but habits. What do people do today, that are like things that are part of their routine, if you will, and they try to get to the solution for that problem. Love it, love it. Since you touched on the word offline, and I've been thinking about offline businesses also. Um, COVID has last year, it has impacted businesses tremendously, right? So I'm thinking about salons, restaurants, all of that. Does the hooked model apply just for the tech products, or does it apply to offline businesses as well?
So the hook model can apply to offline businesses, but it's certainly not as easy. The hook model has these four key phases of trigger, action, reward, and investment. And the first three you can do online and offline. The fourth one is kind of hard to do offline because the investment phase is where the user puts something into the product to make it better with use. And if you actually look at offline experiences that are very sticky, where people do form habits, you actually see it. Like I'll give you a great example. If you go to the same hair salon, right? If you go to the same barber time and time again, and you don't think about going back to that person, like for example, when I go get my hair cut, I don't shop around for the best haircut or the best price or the most skilled barber. I'm pretty sure my barber, as you can tell, is not the most skilled barber in the world, but I've invested in that relationship. So a good barber knows how I like my son. He knows the name of my child. He knows what I do for a living. He has collected information about me that makes that experience better. Okay, so that would be an offline example. What does an online example look like? Well, every time you go onto Facebook or Google or Instagram or WhatsApp or Slack or Snapchat, they're collecting data about you, and that is shaping the experience. The more connections you have, the more comments you leave, the more likes you submit, that data is being used to feed and shape your future experience to make it better and better with use. So it's a lot easier to do this at scale with a technology product, but there are certainly examples of offline product that use the same exact mechanic.
Yeah, I'm going back to thinking about my family's business. They have a restaurant, so I'm thinking the more personal you get with your customers, like understanding relationship building, the more we see them returning back to the business. And so,
Yeah.
um,
What we're doing here is we're using base level human psychology, right? We all have the need to understand others and to be understood ourselves. I mean, that's what makes, our favorite restaurant is about it's not just about the food, right? There's a little bit about the food, but really it's about the fact that I know the owner there and they know me and they always give me the best table and they know what I like and they save the good stuff for me. When you do that, when you have that kind of close relationship with your customer, online, offline, doesn't matter, you build that type of relationship so that when a consumer says, hey, where should we go to eat? Well, little or no conscious thought, we go to that place. That's my favorite place.
any product we use, the more personalized it is, some of these apps like Headspace or Calm or something like that, the more personalized they get, the more we know, yeah, okay, they know me. There's also the other part, like about the data, how much these apps know about us. Of course, there's that other part, but I think
Yeah.
as humans, we do I like that. Okay, they know my preferences and they're showing me based on my preferences, what I
Yeah.
want to see. Yeah.
So this metaphor is actually perfect. I call this data gossip. Okay. So if let's make this totally offline. And I'll show you where many companies online building tech products go wrong is where, let's say we get together, right? So we have lunch together and we have a beautiful meal and I tell you what's going on in my life and I'm a little bit vulnerable and I tell you about, hey, I'm struggling with my career here, there, and here's what's going on with my kids. And, I start disclosing information about myself. Well, that's how people build relationships offline, right? Let's say time goes by, a month passes, and we have another lunch together. And I sit down and I realize that my friend doesn't remember anything I told them, right? Everything I told them just over their head. They didn't remember a single thing. Either my friend has amnesia or they're not a very good friend, right? If your friend doesn't listen to you and remember what you told them, and that enhances your relationship over time, you're not going to be their friend for very long. We in the product design community do this all the time. Customers want us to improve the experience. They're desperate for us to make it easier to use with use. And we have the data. We just don't do anything with that data. And that's a huge mistake. What's also a huge mistake is data gossip. Imagine if we sit down for lunch and I tell you about what's going on in my life and it's done under confidence that you won't share that with other people. And then I hear that you told 3 other people about what I told you that was meant just for you. Well, how would I feel? I'd be very offended. And this is exactly what happens with companies. Customers love it when you use their data to make the product better. What they don't like is if you then sell that data to somebody who's not part of the relationship. That's data gossip.
I was getting distracted looking at this comment, but it's a funny one. Anmol here, he's saying after reading Hooked, every time I use Instagram, I get weird about thinking a whole company is running after and feeding on my negative emotions. Going back to your point of internal trigger.
You're right. And in fact, I'll really blow your mind here. Everything you do is run on negative emotions. Everything. We used to think that human motivation was about carrots and sticks, right? The pursuit of pleasure and the avoidance of pain. It's not true.
It's not.
In fact, okay, I'm guessing everybody's seen The Matrix. Do you remember that scene in The Matrix where Neo holds the spoon and he realizes there is no spoon because it's a simulation? Here, let me give you a moment right now. Okay, we all know about carrots and sticks, right? That to motivate somebody to do something, you have to motivate them with carrots, the rewards, and the stick, punishment, right?
Yep.
Here's the thing. Pain and pleasure is not neurologically how the brain works. In fact, all motivation, everything you do is motivated by one thing, and that is the desire to escape discomfort. So here's the Matrix moment. The carrot is the stick. The carrot is the stick. Our desire for rewards, lusting, craving, wanting is itself uncomfortable. So everything you do, everything you buy, every action you take, all human motivation is about a desire to escape discomfort, which means as product designers, we have to understand what is that pain point, right? We have to understand what it is in order to design products and solutions to satiate that discomfort. That is why we are doing important work. If you are building product, you are solving people's pain. This is an important job. We need this job in the world desperately because there's a lot of suffering out there. So your job is to solve that person's pain, okay? It also means that if we get distracted from things, if we do things we didn't intend to do, we're doing them for the same reason. We are looking to escape discomfort, sometimes in a way that's unhealthy. So this is a really important revelation, and it's what connects my 2 books together, that we can have both. We can have products designed to help us do good habits and build healthy behaviors in our life, but we can also use this knowledge to say, wait a minute, that particular behavior is not serving me. I feel like I'm serving it. I want to stop doing that behavior. Well, where do we start? We master the internal triggers. We realize, wait a minute, this is why I'm doing these behaviors. If you're using Instagram too much, the first step is to ask yourself, what emotion, what internal trigger am I trying to escape from? And this is how we begin to use these products in a helpful way, as opposed to in an unhelpful way that uses us.
Absolutely. Love it. I'm glad you brought the second book because I want to segue into your second book. I think about like, day to day, what makes us indistractable. So, can you tell us what this book is about and how do we get
Yeah,
indistractable basically?
sure. So fundamentally, becoming indistractable is about living with personal integrity. You see, we all know that being a liar is a bad thing, right? None of us want to be liars. To be called dishonest, to be called a liar
Mhm.
is a terrible put down. And we, of course, most people are pretty honest. Believe it or not, surveys find that most people are pretty honest. They don't lie to their family. They don't lie to their friends. They don't lie to their coworkers. Most people, most of the time, are pretty good at being honest people, except when it comes to lying to ourselves. We lie to ourselves all day long. We say we're going to exercise, we don't. We say we're going to eat healthy, not so much. We say we're going to work on that big project, and yet somehow we don't. We do something else. We say we're going to be with our kids, right? We're going to finally have some quality time with the people we love, except we're checking email and our phones as opposed to being fully present with people. The problem is not that we don't know what to do. The problem is we don't know how to stop getting in our own way. That's why the macro skill, the skill of the century, is becoming indistractable, because there is no facet of your life that does not depend upon your ability to control your attention. All of these things, first and foremost, the thing you have to nail first is your ability to control your attention and control your time. That is how we choose the kind of life we want. If you can't control your time and attention, you can't do any of that stuff well. So that is the most important skill of the century, especially when distraction is so easy to find. When we're carrying around all these distractions with us in our pockets, it's incredibly tempting to go off track. So let's start by understanding what is distraction. This is a word that I thought I understood, I didn't, and then most people think they understand and they don't. The best way to test yourself to see, wait a minute, do I actually understand what is distraction, is to ask yourself, what is the opposite of distraction? Most people will tell you the opposite of distraction is focus, right? But
Mm.
that's not true. It's not focus. The opposite of distraction is not focus. The opposite of distraction is traction. That traction and distraction come from the same Latin root, trahare, which means to pull. And they both words end in the same 6 letters, A-C-T-I-O-N, that spells action. So traction, by definition, is any action that pulls you towards what you said you were going to do, things that you do with intent, things that move you towards your values and help you become the kind of person you want to become. The opposite of traction is distraction. Distraction is any action that pulls you away from what you plan to do, further away from your values and further away from becoming the kind of person you want to become. So this is really, really important for 2 reasons. Number one, anything can become a distraction. How many times have you sat in front of your desk? I got this big project I want to work on right now. Nothing's going to get in my way. I got to do this project. No distraction, no procrastination. Here I go. I'm going to get to work. But first, let me check some email.
I feel exposed, Near.
Right? Oh, this is autobiographical. This is why I wrote this book, because I used to do this all the time. This is what we call pseudo work, right? Why? Well, email, I feel like I'm being productive, right? I got to do email at some point. Eventually, it's got to get done. So I just got to do it at some stage, right? So that's being productive, isn't it? No. If it's not what you plan to do with your time, it is just as much of a distraction. Okay, it's pseudo work. So when people like to tick off little boxes on their to-do list, we can talk about why to-do lists are terrible. We can talk about that in a minute. But that feeling of easy tasks that help me feel like I'm getting stuff done is oftentimes the worst form of distraction, because this is a case of distraction tricking you into prioritizing the easy work and the urgent work at the expense of the important and hard work. So anything can be a distraction if it's not what you plan to do, even the work type tasks. On the other end of the spectrum, everything can become traction. right? So don't buy this narrative that you hear these days from these chicken little tech critics that say, oh, social media is melting your brain. It's addicting everyone. It's bad for you. Stop using it. Silly nonsense. The science doesn't support it. And hey, if you want to spend time on social media, great. Enjoy it. You want to play video games? No problem. I'm not going to tell you not to, but do it on your schedule and according to your values, not anybody else's. That's how you turn distraction into traction.
Setting intention into what we want to accomplish, not just doing it for the sake of just ticking the boxes in the to-do list.
Exactly, right. It's all a to-do list, running your life on a to-do list is probably one of the worst things you can do for your personal productivity. Now, writing things down is fine. What is terrible is running your life according to that to-do list, measuring yourself with these little boxes that we get to check off. It's a very ineffective technique. A much better technique is to use what's called a time box calendar. It's one of these 4 major pillars we talk about in the book of measuring yourself, not based on what you finished, but did you work on a task for as long as you said you would without distraction? And it turns out that people who do that, people who time box their calendar and say, I'm going to work on this task for an hour, this task for 30 minutes, this task for the next hour, people who do that are actually more productive. They finish more stuff than the people who run their life with a to-do list.
Love it, love it. That's a lot of food for thought, and for even, personally thinking about, how we can prioritize, set intention, and avoid distraction, getting distracted and actually getting something accomplished. Especially in the world where we have multiple projects going on, multiple priorities, work life, side projects, all kinds of stuff. I want to get into, since you talked about to-do lists, does the book cover any sort of hacks at all? Like, how to have this inbox? We have tons and tons of email. How to conquer that
Yeah.
email, full of inbox?
Right. So there are 4 key pillars to becoming indistractable, 4 big strategies. Now, tactics are what you do. Strategy is why you do it. And it's much more important for me to teach people the strategy, not the tactics, because tactics are cheap, right? Turn off notifications, use this app, that app. That's cheap stuff. You can Google that. What I want to teach people is this deeper psychology behind how to overcome their distractions, how to become indistractable. That's what took me 5 years of research, was figuring out these tried and true science-backed methods to understand the root cause of distraction and what to do about it. So now that we understand traction, distraction, we also have our triggers. We talked about the triggers earlier. We have external triggers and internal triggers. External triggers we talked about earlier, that's all the pings, the dings, the rings, all these things in our outside environment that can lead us towards traction or distraction. But the root cause of most distraction, again, 90% of the time we check our phones because of an internal trigger, not an external trigger. So that's the first place to start. The first step to becoming indistractable is mastering the internal triggers. As we talked about earlier, all motivation is a desire to escape discomfort, which means if all our behavior is spurred by a desire to escape discomfort, that means, write this down if you're listening, this will change your life. Time management requires pain management. Let me say that again. Time management requires pain management. If you don't figure out what is the source of the discomfort that you are trying to escape, whether it's too much news, too much booze, too much football, too much Facebook, if you don't figure out what you are escaping from, you will always find something to distract you. Always. You have to figure out what is that root cause: boredom, uncertainty, fatigue, anxiety, stress, whatever it might be. You have to learn what it is and what you are going to do to respond to it, so it leads you towards traction rather than trying to escape it with distraction. It's the most important step. None of the other life hacks and tips and tricks will work if you don't live by this principle that time management requires pain management. That's step 1. Step 2, make time for traction. You cannot call something a distraction unless you know what it distracted you from. Let me say that again. You can't call something a distraction unless you know what it distracted you from. So if I look at your calendar and there's nothing on it, you have no right to say you got distracted. Because what did you get distracted from? You didn't decide what you want to do with your time in advance. So you've got to plan out your day, or somebody else is going to plan it for you. That's this research around making time for traction. And then I talk about how you can synchronize your schedule with your boss. Many people say, well, if I plan my schedule, what if my boss needs me? I've heard it all before. Okay, I got your answers. You're not that special. Everybody has the same problem. And I'll tell you exactly what to do about it in the book. You can do what's called a schedule sync with your boss, with your family members, to get everybody on the same page. It is a life-changing practice that will change your home life relationships. Your boss will worship the ground you walk on if you use these tactics. The third step is to hack back the external triggers. So we talked about the internal triggers. Right. The external triggers also can lead us towards distraction. So this is where we get into the nitty-gritty. By the way, this is only 10% of the time. So this is where people focus, right? Like grayscale your phone or do this app. It's nice, and it's important, but it's not the real cause. But I did want to give people techniques that they can use around hacking back their news feed, hacking back meetings. Oh my God, how many meetings do we have to sit through that are completely pointless distractions, right? I give you methods and tactics to make sure that meetings aren't constant sources of distraction. Group chat, right? If you're constantly on Slack or WhatsApp, how do we deal with those external triggers? I walk you through every single one of those external triggers. And finally, we have to prevent distraction with pacts. Pacts are these pre-commitment devices, these things that we do in advance to make sure, as the last line of defense, if the other three tactics fail, we have a firewall against distraction that prevents us from falling off track. And so it's really about using these four techniques in concert: master internal triggers, make time for traction, hack back external triggers, and prevent distraction with pacts. This is how we become indistractable.
Awesome. I love that. So pacts go back to um, promises with ourselves. Is that
with ourselves or with other people or with technology? Ironically enough, we can actually use technology to prevent ourselves from getting distracted by technology.
Right. We've talked about habit forming products and also not getting distracted by technology. When we talk about habits, how much of an impact does like community have in habit building? I don't know if you've heard about this Peloton, and they're like, I compare them to Apple, but with their technology and with their hardware devices.
Yeah. They use the hook model, believe it or not. I was at dinner with someone over a year and a half ago, and they told me that everybody in the executive team at Peloton read Hooked.
Awesome. I when I read about their model and what they're doing with their software, hooked is the first word that came to my mind. It did. And so I got to thinking, right, from fitness perspective, there's a tons and millions of fitness programs out there. How much does community really have that impact in building that habit? And
yeah, it's one potential type of variable reward. In the hook model, remember we talked about trigger, action, reward, and investment. So in the reward phase, we have three types of variable rewards: rewards of the tribe, rewards of the hunt, and rewards of the self. Yeah. So rewards of the tribe are these rewards that come from other people. So it is one mechanic that we can use to keep people engaged with platforms that have some kind of social element. Doesn't mean that every habit forming product needs to have a social element, but many of them do because they utilize these rewards of the tribe.
Awesome. Rewards of the tribe. So it's a community building. I mean, having a community around definitely, I guess, helps with.
It's one potential reward that you can offer. It all depends on the internal trigger, right? That's why we go back to those internal triggers. Super important. Some people don't like to exercise with others. Some people need to exercise with others. So it's really about what the customer is looking for, whatever the internal trigger is, whatever that need, that pain point is that we talked about earlier, the reward has to provide. So if people are seeking connection, that's uncomfortable, right? Seeking connection is a pain point. We want that. It's something we need. And so the variable reward has to provide it by connecting people together.
Where can we find your book, Nir?
Wherever books are sold. So Amazon, your local bookseller, Audible, I narrate them myself. So if you like to listen to books, feel free. You can also go to my website. I have a free complimentary workbook for both of my books that you can get there at nirandfar.com. It's spelled N-I-R, like my first name, N-I-R and far.com. You can get the Indistractable workbook. It's complimentary, whether you get the book or not. I actually couldn't fit it into the final edition of the book, but it's a great guide to help you get started on your path to becoming indistractable.
Let's get to questions.
Yeah, we got one here from Mark. What do you think of FocusMate? It seems to be a very successful way of setting a 15-minute time block with an online peer to shape goals, avoid distractions, and avoid procrastination. Couldn't have said it better myself, Mark. It's actually in the book Indistractable, and I love this product so much. I actually invested in FocusMate in the very early days. I love FocusMate. For those of you who don't use it or haven't heard of it, FocusMate is kind of like chat roulette for enterprise in a way, right? For people who want to stay focused. So it's chat roulette without all the nasty stuff that used to happen on chat roulette. The way it works is you book a time with another person. So you have this online calendar, you book a time, you say 9 a.m., I really need to work on this project. You're matched with another person, your focus mate. And at that time, that person shows up, you see them on your screen. You real quick say, okay, what are you working on? What are you working on? Go. You have this 50-minute sprint of time where you'll see them working, they see you working. And this is an example of that fourth strategy, that fourth pillar of preventing distraction with a pact. You're making a pact. You're making an agreement with another person. We're both going to stay focused and work just on that task at hand. It's an incredibly effective technique. I think it's very cheap too. It's only like $5 a month.
I did not know about FocusMate. I'll have to check it out. That's awesome. So like an accountability partner, right? So you
Right.
working together with the person. That's awesome.
Right.
I think
And you can do this, of course, by yourself, right? If you have a work colleague, if you have your spouse or somebody, you can do that. You don't have to use the technology, but as many of us are working from home, many of us are still under quarantine. It's hard to find somebody to keep you accountable. Well, now there's no excuse. You can just go online and find someone to keep you accountable whenever you want to get your work done.
awesome. Awesome. All right. We have our next question here as well. What do you think of the term attention economy? Is everybody's fighting for our attention? Instagram, Clubhouse.
Yes, everybody's fighting for your attention, and that's nothing new. That's always been the case. Ever since the first man and woman were sexually attracted to each other, they fought for attention from their mate as opposed to giving attention to someone else. This is nothing new. We always fight for attention, and of course, today when people monetize your attention, every newspaper, every television station, every media company makes money by selling your attention to advertisers. Now, that doesn't mean it's evil. It doesn't mean it's bad. It's actually great, right? We get many of these services for free, right? But what it does mean is that we have to be very cautious about who we give our attention to. There's a reason that we use the same terminology to describe how we utilize money as how we utilize time. Think about it, right? We make money just like we would make time for something. We spend time just like we spend money. We save time just like we save money. And we pay attention. We don't give attention, we pay attention just like we pay with dollars and cents. Why do we use that terminology? Because time is money. And so unlike money that you can make limitless amounts of, right? You can make billions and billions of dollars like Jeff Bezos, but hey, guess what? Jeff Bezos wakes up and has exactly the same 24 hours in a day. And so we have to be very judicious about how we spend our time. Most people give almost no thought to how they spend their time. Try and get them to pay 99 cents for an app. Oh, no. That's too expensive. But take their time watching crap on Netflix or the news or whatever else. Oh, yeah, they give hours of time. The average American, check this out, the average American right now spends 5 hours a day watching television.
5 hours. Wow. I
Yeah.
did not know that. Wow. All right. They say distraction pulls you away from your primary goal, but it reveals your desire. What are your thoughts?
Maybe. I mean, I think it's very useful to think about traction as the opposite of distraction, right? It's dis is is that differentiation. Traction is things you intend to do. Distraction is anything that is not that, right? Whatever you plan, whatever is not what you plan to do. I think this is very important because it prevents us from moralizing perfectly normal, healthy behavior. And this is very important because, it's very easy for people to say, oh, me watching cricket or football on TV, that's okay. But you playing a video game, ooh, that's a waste of time. How frivolous. What's the difference? Tell me what's the difference between watching football or cricket on TV and playing a video game? There's no difference. They're both pastimes. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with either. They're both great as long as you do them on your schedule, not someone else's. So you want to plan time to watch that movie or to play a video game? Great. Put it in your calendar according to your values. Do it with intent. Don't do it when you feel a need to escape reality. Do it with forethought.
Awesome. Awesome. We have our next question here. You told us you write a book every 5 years. What's the next book you're planning to write? I'm wondering, any
That's a
cues?
good question. Yeah, it's true. I typically, that's kind of been my cadence, a book every 5 years, but I don't know the next one yet. Typically what I do is I write about problems that I'm facing. Look, I wrote Indistractable for me. I was pretty much the most distracted person you'd ever met. I wrote the book for me, first and foremost, because I struggled with this. And today I have a better relationship than ever with my family. I'm more productive at work. I'm in the best shape of my life physically because I do what I say I'm going to do. And it's been a life-changing practice. And so now I'm trying to figure out, well, what is that next challenge in my own life that I'd like to solve? And look, many times when I have a challenge, I read somebody else's book and they solve it for me. I don't need to write the book. But once in a while, there's a problem that nobody else has solved to my satisfaction. And this is the case with distraction. I read these books that say, oh, put away your phone, stop using social media. Okay, thanks. Like, that's not very helpful. I get fired, right? Most people can't do their jobs without these tools. So I really wanted to write a book that was very practical, that also acknowledged that, look, these tools are by and large wonderful. They're great. It's about how we use them that makes all the difference. So
Right.
I don't know yet, Amol. If you have any ideas for a book you'd like me to write, please let me know.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you said it. When I hear this advice, uninstalling apps on the phone and turning off the phone for a long period of time, for a day, going to retreats for like 10-15 days, that's all is nice. Retreats are nice. I like them. Different purpose. But practically, I think we live in this day and age where technology, there's lots of good uses of this technology as well.
We're such spoiled little kids too when it comes to these technologies. It's like we only look at the bad aspects. Can you imagine if we had tried to go through this coronavirus crisis without these technologies? Imagine for a moment, what if it wasn't COVID-19? What if it was COVID-90? Imagine if the world had been stricken with this COVID in the year 1990. Can you imagine how much worse it would have been? I mean, we are talking right now, you're in San Francisco, I'm in Singapore. We're talking with video phone for free.
Right.
It's amazing. And we
Exactly.
don't stop to think for a minute, oh my God, this stuff is incredible. Now, is it perfect? No, lots of problems with this technology. But the solution is not to be one of these big babies that only complains about the problems. We have to fix the problems. We need people like the people who are listening right now to get into this industry to work on making the current generation of technology better by fixing these bad aspects with the technology. So products like FocusMate, right? That fix the problem of distraction with technology. Guess what? With more, better, new technology. That's a huge part of the solution, is adopting new technologies that fix the bad aspects, as well as adapting our own behavior in terms of the way we interact with these technologies.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree there. Okay, last one here. Harvey says, apart from technology, I also feel thoughts are also distractions sometimes. How to deal with that?
Yeah, this is the root cause of distraction is your thoughts, is your feelings. And the fact of the matter is that far too many people believe everything they think. But there's a difference, right? We believe whatever we think, we believe whatever we feel as truth, and it's not. They're just feelings, they're just thought, they're just passing emotions. And if we don't know how to take a step back and view those emotions, thoughts, and feelings as fleeting, they can get the best of us. We can enter into rumination cycles. We can get distracted in our own head. Whereas when we can remove ourselves and have techniques at our disposal to deal with those thoughts, emotions, feelings, and fears in a productive way, we can actually use them as rocket fuel to move us towards traction rather than escaping through them with a distraction.
Wonderful. If there's, so Tanisha is asking if there's a lot of goals at the same time, it all gets so overwhelming and that the things become a blockage for every action. How to deal with that?
So this is where we have to start with our values. Okay, values are attributes of the person you want to become. Values are attributes of the person you want to become. So this is why we have to turn our values into time. Don't start with the goals. Start with your time. And this is where that second step of making time for traction is so important. I want you to sit down every week and I want you to look at your calendar ahead because that's a constraint. We know that people operate best under constraints. So don't put all your dreams and goals and aspirations on a vision board or on a to-do list. I want you to put that time in your calendar for how much time you want to spend on the things that will help you live out your values. So this is where I talk about in the book about these 3 life domains: you, your relationships, and finally your work. Most people work in the wrong order. First, you have to start with you. How much time do you want to invest in yourself when it comes to living out your values? If your values include taking care of your body, do you have time for exercise and rest in your day? It's got to be there. It's not going to happen. Do you have time for the relationships in your life, or do you give people you love whatever scraps of time are left over? Then finally, with your work, what's the important things that you want to spend time on in your work, including, please do yourself a favor, book some time in your day to work without distraction. If you don't make that time to work without distraction, I promise you, somebody is going to try and grab that time away from you. So that's why it's so important not to just talk about your goals, not to just talk about your values. In fact, you shouldn't. You should put it in your calendar. You've got to turn your values into time. That's how we get some sanity over this. Because if you just keep a big long to-do list of all the goals, it drives you crazy. Instead, when you know, okay, I'm going to work on this task for 30 minutes, this task for an hour, now you know exactly what to do and when you're supposed to do it. And everything that's not that is a distraction.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that. So you guys, as you use these techniques, make sure you use the hashtag Indistractable and tag Nir. We'd love your feedback. Definitely use these techniques and definitely give the feedback too. I have a question here. How do you think meditation can help with, yeah.
So meditation, I don't talk about meditation in the book just because I think it's been covered to death. Everybody's heard of meditation. Everybody knows it works if you do it. The problem is people don't do it. So if you want to do meditation, it can be very helpful. If it's part of your value system to take care of yourself, wonderful, do it. I meditated every single day for a whole year. Didn't really do anything for me. I have to admit, I got really good at meditating, but it didn't help me become any better at helping me focus on other areas of my life. Now, I'm just one person. I'm not a validated study, but I tried it. And part of my frustration was that I think many people sell meditation as the answer to everything. It's not. It doesn't always work. Sometimes you can't meditate your problems away. You have to go fix those problems and do what it takes to fix those problems. So meditation is a tool. It's a nice tool for certain jobs. It's not a fix-all.
As you said, I started thinking meditation cannot help me lose weight. So if I
No.
don't, exactly, right? So if I don't plan my day and if I don't plan time on my calendar, like you're saying, right? So I am not going to lose weight, things like that. Yeah,
That's right.
absolutely.
That's right.
Uh,
Meditation what we find is that meditation makes you good at meditating. It doesn't necessarily always translate. And look, many people have a really tough time meditating because they haven't figured out how to fit it in their day. How do they stop getting distracted from even sitting down to meditate in the first place? So that's why,
right.
again, becoming indistractable is the macro skill. Do yourself a favor, spend a couple hours with my book. I promise you, if you follow these 4 steps, there's nothing you can't do. There's nothing that you can't. If you say you're going to do it, you will follow through if you utilize these 4 tactics that I described in the book.
I want to, get us to wrapping this up. This has been a wonderful, very, very thought-provoking session. Loved all your thoughts around this, the hook model. That's absolutely useful for myself as a product manager. I now, after reading the book, I personally now have a different perspective, the way I look at tech products. And I try to find a hook model in there somewhere,
Right.
what's a reward being used. So I love it,
Perfect.
and I've recommended lots of people here in the product community, career community. They have sent me pictures with the book, and now with Indistractable, that's I'm like in the beginning chapters, but I'm going to finish the book. What's your final tips? Any thoughts you have? Parting thoughts for the community here? Um,
Sure.
for anything, Indistractable, hooked, whatever. What
Yeah. So I
final?
think if you were to boil down my book into one mantra, into one lesson, it's this: that the antidote to impulsiveness is forethought. Let me say that again. The antidote to impulsiveness is forethought. Fundamentally, the reason we don't do what we know we should do, the reason we don't live the lives we know we deserve, is not because we are morally deficient. There's nothing wrong with us. We're not broken in any way. It's simply that we haven't learned the tools to deal with our impulses in a healthy way. And so we have these impulses to eat that chocolate cake if we're trying not to get distracted by social media as opposed to being with our families, to check email as opposed to working on that big project. It's all about impulse control. Well, the antidote is forethought, that there is no distraction that we can't overcome if we simply plan ahead. If you plan today what you will do to prevent getting distracted tomorrow, that is how we become indistractable, and anyone can do it.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Love it. Absolutely love it. Thank you
Awesome.
so much, Nir. It was an
Oh, my
honor to
pleasure.
have you.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining. Stay strong, stay indistractable, and see you next time. Thanks again.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.